So one arm pull-up negatives. How are they in terms of training for the one arm pull-up? Do they make sense to incorporate into a program? Let's go. There's been some discussions online lately whether or not the one arm pull-up negative is a good movement in order to get your one arm pull-up. Some people talk about one arm pull-up negatives being great for working towards the movement, whereas other people, particularly Geek Climber, made a video where he spoke about negatives being very ineffective. So there are several points that Geek Climber discusses in this video, and I sort of just wanted to break them down, starting off with the notion that it's too high risk to reward doing negatives. Personally, I didn't really train negatives until I had fairly good unilateral strength. I might have already had my first one armor by the time I really started incorporating them, and by that point, if you can do the lockout from complete standstill, from complete ground zero all the way up, I mean, most likely the negative is not going to be much of an issue. But I started training it quite late, so I'll say that it's absolutely possible that's high risk to reward. Personally, my take on it is that you shouldn't really start doing negatives until you have quite darn good unilateral strength. I would never really get on the bar just for the sake of getting the negative. That's never really been my approach. What I've done is I've been quite into isometrics. By the way, I have a good video on that on the channel, so take a look at that if you want. And isometrics have worked wonders for my unilateral strength and overall been amazing in my one-arm pull-up journey. I've done an isometric hold either at like a complete lockout or at 90 degrees, for example, and then once I feel that like I can't really do much more, I might have incorporated a negative, let's say the last 1 or 2 seconds, so that instead of having a bit of a abrupt ending to the ISO hold or having to catch myself or just completely going from, and this is one of the things Geek Climber talks about in the video as well.
Pray that when your arms go abruptly from max tension to zero tension, nothing will get injured.
Instead of going from complete tension in the muscles to just like really abruptly go to no tension, I've sort of used the negatives to like slowly ease down to like neutral hang and then let go of the bar. So for me it's worked well that way as a sort of transition out of the isometric holds, but also just in terms of like, you could look at it as like squeezing a bit of extra juice out of the isometric holds. So negatives have never really been a primary movement for me in this training, and I do absolutely see the point. Like, you wouldn't want to risk your shoulder health.
Free fall onto your shoulders and pray that your shoulders can take the force without getting injured.
So if I have anything I can say on this, it would be wait with negatives until you have good unilateral strength. Another point Geek Climber discusses is that of positioning, and especially for the one-arm pull-up movement, you'd be quite differently positioned if you were to go from the bottom of the movement to the top compared to what you would do in just a pure negative, where you often end up in the chin-up position and you're not really in the same body position. And here also, like based on what he said in his video, some people mean that the negatives are good for movement patterns, some mean they're good for strength, yada yada yada. And it's kind of difficult to put negatives into any of these categories because personally, I don't really think it's the best strength builder out there. I feel I've said this on like most of the exercises I've discussed, but so far I've found like a few that I think are really good. And as I said, like negatives, I'd use them more for like coming out of the isometric hold, for example, or just for squeezing some extra juice out of my training, just for like when you're completely done in that position and completely fatigued, okay, hold as well as you can and control the negative as much as possible. Try to get down as slowly as you can. But by themselves, I wouldn't do them as a strength move. At least I haven't, and I haven't found the need for it. And when it comes to the movement, I do agree, like it's not the optimal body positioning. Here I do think it would be better simply doing either banded exercises. I have a video on like banded and uneven pull-up variations and stuff. But yeah, as far as positioning goes, I also agree with him. You are in a very different position when you do the one-arm pull-up negative compared to doing the actual one-arm pull-up or even the one-arm chin-up for that matter. So I absolutely do agree. And as he says, he brings up a very valid point. When you're able to do pull-ups, like you can do a ton of reps, it doesn't really matter whether you're in an awkward position with like your head or your shoulders or your elbows. If you can do a lot of pull-up reps, you know how to go around it and you have enough strength that your brain understands the movement to a high enough degree for you to be able to overcome it. That also makes sense, like all of the components needed for you to do a pull-up are there for you to overcome any of the problems you might have on the way. Similar to the muscle-up. You don't need too much strength to do a muscle-up, sure you need to have some dynamic strength and stuff, but it's not really the strength that's the biggest problem for most people. Like I often talk to people that are trying to get their muscle up and they would absolutely have the strength. The problem is that just they haven't really managed the movement pattern, that's a big thing, but also just once you have it, once your brain understands like, oh gosh, this is actually how I'm supposed to do it.
Guilty.
Then it sort of clicks and you can not rep them out, but it's a lot easier to then just do it consistently. And I think a similar thing applies to the one-arm pull-up, right? And as he says, if you haven't ever done a one-arm pull-up rep, you sort of would need, and it would be absolutely advantageous to have everything work in your favour, absolutely including body positioning and movement pattern. So although the negatives might have some resemblance to some type of movement pattern you might have on a one-arm pull, when you're really good at them, you're really strong at them, and you can do them consistently because you can sort of cheat the movement wherever you want, then that is not going to apply to someone that's never done the movement. So here again, yeah, I'd absolutely agree. The one-arm pull-up negatives are absolutely not ideal in terms of body positioning. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the takes of Geek Climber. Not sure if I missed some points, but all in all, I'd say that negatives, they might have their place, but for me, the only experience I really have with them are for coming out of isometric holds and for squeezing some extra juice out of that movement. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think there are better exercises. Pretty much the entire journey, I think there are better exercises. Again, they might have their place in exiting iso holds. They might have their place in squeezing that extra juice of strength gains, but I wouldn't really use them too much. And I kind of agree with Geek Climber on most of the points. So yeah, stay safe, boys. You don't want to injure your shoulders. Don't want to mess anything up. So take the necessary precautions. See if there are any better exercises that fit you. If you haven't found any, by the way, check out the channel. I think there are some decent ones. I've run through quite a few of them right now. By the way, if you have any exercise I haven't yet sort of reviewed or given my opinions about or tested myself on the road to the one-arm chin-up and one-arm pull-up, then please let me know in the comments down below. But as always, remember to keep on training, train what you love, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.